of the background, but it's on designing a more inclusive meals program. One thing that we found through the pandemic that most of us already knew is that there are families and kids who do fall between the cracks, just based on a lot of different factors and priorities that, that drive us. And so we have found some amazing speakers who have really been able to find that niche and figure out how do you design a program that meets the kids' needs and meets them where they're at. So we're super excited to get started. As you know, this is going to be one SNA CEU. And our speakers for today are going to be Maria Anderson from Roseville School District in Minnesota. We're going to have Grant Melendez from the Immigrant Welcome Center in Indiana. And then last but not least, we're going to have Francis Montoya Gatewood at Vaughan Next Century Learning Center in California. Next slide, please. So just to give you just a brief overview of the agenda, we're going to do a little introduction and housekeeping. Then the speakers will be able to share their stories. And then you will have time for question and answer. We're going to take a brief bio break because we know people will be sitting for a while up until that point. Then we're going to break up into groups and you'll have time to actually start planning your next steps of how do you create a more inclusive meal program at your schools. So we'll do that for 30 minutes. Then we'll come back as a group, maybe share a few best practices, and then we'll wrap you up and highlight some resources, and everyone will be sent on their way. Next slide.
All righty. Hi, guys. My name is Anna Rivera. I am on the No Kid Hungry campaign under the field team. So as you guys know, here at Share Strength, we're an organization dedicated to ending hunger and poverty through proven effective campaigns. We connect people who care to make these ideas work and just collaborate, right? And how we do that is through our different campaigns of No Kid Hungry Cooking Matters and Community Wealth Partners. Next slide, please. So through those campaigns, we do feeding kids by working with schools and communities to make food programs available for every kid in need. Teaching families how to cook and make the most of their food under budgets by preparing nutritious food for their kids, and then mobilizing the public and our leaders so that, ending childhood hunger is a top priority and we create awareness. So really, it's a lot of the work of our communities and bringing our communities together and creating those partnerships and really hearing them out. So I think without these campaigns, we wouldn't be able to be effective and reach all the folks and make all of these connections. Next slide.
All right, and I am Emily Pia. I'm also with No Kid Hungry and on the Center for Best Practices team with Janine. So excited to have you all joining us today. And I will, before I dive into the objectives, let you know that I'm managing all the tech in the background. So if there's something you can't see or something you can't hear, or I stopped sharing the slides and I'm talking as if I'm talking to slides, let me know. Just send something in the chat and we will make sure that you get the most out of this workshop. And this is the first time we're doing a workshop where we're all kind of on video and able to take ourselves off mute and have a conversation. So I'm really excited about this. And if you have any feedback too, as we're going along or afterwards, please do share that with us. We're hoping that this is a little more interactive than a typical webinar that we run. So all that being said, today our objectives are listed on the screen. I will briefly cover them as I'm admitting more people from the waiting room. We've got 155 folks joining us so far today, which is really exciting. The first is, so we have Francis, Maria, and Graham today who are talking about their programs and their best practices. And so we're hoping by the end that based on what they've shared and based on a resource that Anna's going to walk through in a second, that you'll be able to recall at least 2 strategies for designing more inclusive school meals programs. We're also hoping that you'll be able to explain why it's essential to engage kids and families in a really meaningful way when you're designing and implementing the meals program. So things like surveying kids and families, as far as hiring parents and staff to help you figure out what are the best messages and ways to connect kids with meals in your community. So explaining why it's so essential to work directly with kids and families and not just hand a meal, but include them in the process. And then lastly, we're hoping that you can develop an action plan that's specific to your community and tailored to all of the unique aspects and circumstances that you each find yourself in. We know that no community or school district is the same. And so we wanted to provide that 30 minutes at the end of the workshop today to really start helping with some leading questions. We'll have a action plan template for you to fill out to start thinking about how you might take some of these strategies home. And that's what you submit to get a CEU. And we'll give you about a month to submit that action plan. And we'll get back to more of that later, but those are our objectives for today. And so we just wanted to start off kind of framing today's conversation. We know that food is an essential school supply. You all know that on the call. So many of you are incredible school nutrition directors who go above and beyond all year long, but then this year has been a wild one. And we know that, normally you don't have to worry about the access barriers as much when kids are in the same school building, and you don't have to worry about them being able to get to the meals. But now we're throwing in extra factors and extra variables, and kids are all over the community and in their homes. And so it's that much harder to reach kids with healthy school meals during the pandemic. And so yet we know it's nonetheless important. Just because kids are at home doesn't mean that they have the food that they need at home to be able to do virtual school. So knowing that it's so much harder this year to reach kids with healthy school meals, we're going to be focusing on some of those access barriers. So what about the language that you're advertising your meals program in? Are there fears around immigration status that your community may face? And they might not know that showing up to a meal site, they don't have to share their name and their information, and that it's not going to be something that threatens their immigration status. Cultural and religious food preferences. Do kids see themselves reflected and their cultures reflected in the meals programs? And are there ways that school nutrition staff can think about the food that's offered and whether or not it's something that they would eat at home? And then things like housing insecurity. Do kids have access to freezers if you're serving frozen meals that can be reheated later in the week? Do they have a microwave, a stove, or a knife to cut up vegetables if you're serving them in bulk? Schedules of essential workers. I know that's been a big one during the pandemic, and so many amazing school nutrition staff have sent out surveys to find best times and days for essential workers to be able to pick up meals, as well as transportation barriers, which we know always exist in the summer with summer meals, and also comfortability with a meal site location. I was at a conference a couple years ago, and someone shared that when they were a teenager, they identified as LGBTQ, and the meals for summer were only available at a church that they didn't feel comfortable going to. So thinking about some of those barriers that might not be immediately apparent or come to mind, or might not affect every child, but are really important when we're thinking about designing inclusive meals programs. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Anna, and we're going to walk through a toolkit that we designed to help think through some of these questions.
Excellent. So as we're getting through, I think Emily's going to share the resource. Here we are. She's on it, on fire. Okay, so this resource is really to start the conversation about addressing those barriers that Emily covered, right? So who are the folks in your community? What are the demographics? We know that the families and students that we support and are needing these meals are the most important stakeholders, right? So how do we get their feedback? How do we integrate and really analyze the barriers that are in there? So this resource is to really ask us the right questions to address that. So are there students in your district or in your community that speak other languages other than English, right? And what are some opportunities to do so? Here in this resource, you can see a lot of examples of what you can do if you do, right? So if there are other families who are immigrant or refugee, right, within your district, are there transient migrant populations in your district that you may have to figure out the scheduling in terms of distribution? I know that a lot of school districts have started to do that. And then really talking about, if you continue scrolling down, again, these are a variety of different questions that cover a variety of different things. The other questions that we include here is dietary preferences, right? If you have cultural preferences in terms of halal or vegetarian, what does that look like? How can we get started on creating a meal or a menu that is inclusive of those dietary preferences related to cultural preferences or cultural dietary restrictions? And then on the bottom of the resource, we have other great questions that we can talk about engaging with families, right? So once you address those barriers and we see, okay, we need to figure out how to translate all of these materials, or what type of meals are these families looking for in our community? What do they eat, right? What can we serve them that they would like and that would include their spices? These are really good questions to really figure out how to start that relationship. Are there communities in your community or in your district that you can partner with to really dig in and create those relationships? Are there other organizations and folks that are doing this work that you can build upon and work together and collaborate to create these relationships? How do you seek inputs from kids and families? How do you integrate them into that meal program so you're really reflecting the community needs into your meal program? And with that, I'll finish there. I dropped the link in the chat so you guys can take a look at it. Feel free to share any questions as well. But as we're really digesting this content, have these questions in the back of your mind. Really start digging in and kind of saying, wow, does this apply to my community? We know that one size does not fit all. So really analyzing and knowing the expertise and the context of your own district, because I know that all of you guys on this call are experts in your community. So how can we start doing this, and how can we start having these conversations as we're digesting this information that our great panelists will share with us in a couple of minutes?
Thank you so much, Anna, for sharing that. And super important. We're so excited about our speakers, and something that Anna mentioned just got me thinking about. Some of you may not have this experience and may feel just uncomfortable starting those conversations. So it's great to connect with the speakers, connect with the resources, and I think this is going to be a great presentation for everyone. So our first speaker is Maria Anderson, and she is a nutrition coordinator for a diverse school community within the Twin Cities of Minnesota. After talking with her, we're just so excited to hear her speak. She says she's relatively new to the nutrition, school nutrition space, and she's been just soaking up information in her district, but she's really been living it. And as you'll see and hear from her, just her testimony and what they're doing, I think you'll be very excited to hear from her. Fun fact, her favorite school meal is a toss-up between cafe-made mega meatballs or orange chicken with edamame. So getting me hungry. Okay, Maria, take it away.
All right. Hello, everyone. I am Maria Anderson. So just as Emily has said, I'm from Roseville Area Schools, which is a metro district inside the Twin Cities area. Next slide, please. So we are unique in that we kind of are sandwiched right between the Minneapolis and St. Paul metropolitan areas, which means we have, while we're a suburb, we're a pretty diverse suburb, both in cultural, religious groups, but also economically. So we are nestled in there. We serve just over 7,500 students currently. And next slide. Awesome. So just to tell you a little bit about who we are, like I said, very diverse in multiple ways. About 40% of our students are white, but we do have over 82 languages other than English spoken at home. So languages or dialects. About 44% of our students are participating in educational benefits. And in a normal year, we are involved in lots of different programming, as you all are, but the breakfast program, lunch program, after school at-risk supper program, which we call Super Snack in our district, and then the fresh fruit and vegetable program. Next, please. All right, so I like this graphic. I'm sure you have all seen something similar to it. But when we look at inequality throughout school meals, especially right when schools were closing and the start of the pandemic, one of the inequalities identified was just that limited access to meals and potentially the availability to purchase meals. And so something that we could do to kind of balance that out a little bit, add some equality into that, was thinking of ways we could provide curbside meals, maybe home deliveries, but that really still kept up some barriers. So transportation, could families get to us? Work schedules, could they get to us? Maybe a family was in the middle of a quarantine from a COVID diagnosis. So while we had some changes, we still weren't tipping the scale towards equity. So something in our district that we thought of with equity to kind of give different supports to different communities and different families in need is we added home deliveries. So we didn't ask why. If a family said they couldn't get to us for whatever reason, we have been delivering to homes since last March. At our highest, about 1,200 students. Now, because most of our kiddos are back in school, we're only down to about 500. And we also added evening pickups. And then if we tip the scale all the way to justice, so it's really removing those barriers or setting up new structures that support the inequalities, those are, in our world, I think of those as things as like universal meals, eliminating that price barrier, or in this year, a lot of the waivers and eliminating time requirements and who could pick up the meals. The students don't have to be present. So that's the frame of mind. I picture this tree and where we're at when we make our decisions. All right, next slide. So just as you all did at the start of the pandemic, and also many times, I feel like daily at times during the last year, we were just asking ourselves, like, how can we serve our families? How are we getting food to our kiddos that need it most? We really realized quickly, and I think nationwide this was true, that school nutrition really is this safety net. And all of a sudden, when our kiddos weren't in school, they were at risk for not having, you know, their 3 meals a day or 3 meals a day and a snack in some situations. And so to strengthen that safety net, we knew we couldn't do it all, but these were some of the things that we were thinking about. And these 4 areas are what I'll just talk a little bit about what we chose to do. Of course, our district likely looks nothing like your district. So these were, you know, unique to situations that worked well for us. And also after a lot of trial and error. And we know we're still missing populations. We know we're not feeding all our kiddos. But taking a lens, like an equity lens through all these decisions, has helped us try to strengthen that food safety net and try to reach as many of our kiddos as possible. Next slide, please. So one of the first things we had to look at was how we were going to get kids meals, just like you all did, in meal distribution. We originally started out with a school bus route. So last summer and spring, we had school bus routes that went into our highest need neighborhoods and delivered meals daily. We figured that this did not work out and also was tricky for families to get to the school bus at a certain time daily. It was maybe asking a lot during this time. And so we, once school started up again, really revamped our home delivery. So again, doing home deliveries to anyone that asked, they signed up, and curbside. So we had curbside available for all our families at multiple times during the day and in the evening to try to help out those families that are working the day shift and don't have the availability to pick up meals during what we would consider a normal work day for our nutrition services staff. Next slide. The second thing that we were really considering is menu development. Of course, it was like, how do we get everything in our cafeterias down into families' homes? So just that in itself was overwhelming. But then when we started to look through it as like an equity lens, we knew we wanted to make something easier for families. We wanted food to be one less thing that they had to worry about. And so that really led us to providing food in the most ready to eat manner possible. So we were considering, do families have cooking equipment? If I send a bag of rice home, are they going to have a stove to boil water on? Do they have the knowledge of how to boil water? Is a kindergartner going to be able to feed himself? So with that boiling water and bag of rice, we were really thinking, can a kindergartner do this if their parents are working all day, or if they are in charge of all their siblings for the day? We also felt that a microwave was probably the common denominator piece of equipment across most of our families. So we made the decision that everything needed to be able to be microwaved if it needed to be warmed up. So you can see in these pictures, we focused on using overwrap machines to do all our entrees. So this is just a sampling of some of the items we served, but we made sure that each entree contained their vegetable as well. And then we did send along some bulk items, like you can see a cucumber and some cherry tomatoes, but really the cucumber was probably the most like whole intact food that we sent home that would have required knife skills. We felt like even if the kid didn't have a knife skill to cut a cucumber, they could probably eat it like a banana. So we felt okay with that one. And then when we were looking at our menus, a couple of things we were also considering is, our local farmers. We didn't have the ability to do all our farm to school, but we knew that our small emerging farmers were really struggling with schools and restaurant business declining. And so trying to purchase what we could to send home. So this really just looked a lot like fresh produce. In Minnesota, we don't have a big overlap for growing season and farm fresh produce. So it was mostly last fall. And then something else we really thought about is how can we make this food most likely to get into kids' bellies? I really feel it's only good nutrition if it gets into their bellies. And so not only honoring special diets, of course, but we did honor a lot of dietary preferences. We had kiddos that, of course, vegetarian meals. We had some turkey-free meals. We had some kiddos that had really strong preferences for fruits and vegetables. And we knew that they were kind of the decision maker in their household. And so we tried really hard to get them meals that they wanted and what they would eat. Not the most mainstream way to do it. It definitely didn't simplify things, but we knew that kids then would be eating those fruits and vegetables. All right, next slide. Probably the most challenging part, I think many of you would agree, is the communication part of getting the message out. you know what you're doing, but it can be really hard to get your community and school community out there. So we were just really looking at, our social workers. They know our families best, so communicating with them. Our culture liaisons, they know our families best, communicating with them. We did translations for our families. We also, something that came up from our one of our student services directors is not forcing families to use an email or a phone number when signing up. Let them choose. And that really opened the doors for families who maybe didn't have an email but wanted to sign up, or were really protective of some of those pieces of personal information. And then finally, our partnerships. Next slide. We knew that we could not be the only part of this food safety network. And so we really strengthened and made some new partnerships. So previously the Sheridan story, now every meal provided fresh fruits and veggies from their garden for us during the summer. We worked with Second Harvest Heartland and some grant funding to provide family meals and also do SNAP outreach to our families. And then we were really continuing the backpack meals, which comes from every meal as well, to give kiddos non-perishable groceries every weekend or every time they pick up their meals if they are getting them delivered or curbside. Next slide. All right, so that is what we're doing in Roseville. I think that information is going to go out for contacting, but if you want to check out what we're doing, there's some information for you there. That's all, Emily.
Thank you so much, Maria, for sharing. I think it's so important how you mentioned starting with that equity lens, and then the importance of really figuring out how do we serve all kids. And then of course, if no one has any of those communications, they can't really figure out where you're at. So thank you for highlighting the importance of that and partnerships. Our next speaker is Graham Melendez. And Graham comes to us from, he was born in Cusco, Peru, and he moved to Indiana in 2007 after he received a scholarship from the University of Evansville. He's involved in Immigrant Welcome Center, and he's currently the Community Impact Coordinator. And in his role, he's able to build relationships with community partners and the immigrant community so that these connections can transform into resources and really serve the community where he is. So without further ado, Graham, take it away.
Thank you all so much. I really appreciate you having me here today. It's quite an honor and a privilege. If I can go to the next slide. Thank you so much. So that's, as you see, those are the faces of the Immigrant Welcome Center. And so today when I'll share with you about the Immigrant Welcome Center, I definitely want to be mindful of the fact there's many organizations that aren't necessarily connecting to Indianapolis. So I definitely geared it towards the end so that it can definitely encapsulate everything else. But I want to just share with you in general what the IWC does here in Indianapolis. Next slide, please. Because we want to connect many immigrants and refugees to places, resources that can help them. That's, at the end of the day, that's our mission, our big vision. And since 2006, we have more than 13,000 immigrants and refugees we have served. And we hope to keep on growing in that. As you see, our team there on the right is our way to do it. Go ahead. Next slide, please. As you can see, there are all the different ethnicities, but the top 5, at least in Indiana, are Mexico, Burma, India, China, El Salvador. I'm from Peru myself, and so while there are Peruvians here, and I am part of the Peruvian Association of Central Indiana, that doesn't mean that they are the biggest amount of people. So as you'll see in the next slide, there's a juxtaposition of who in Indiana is part of that and who in Indianapolis as well as part here. So as you can see, the top 5 zip codes we have for our IWC clients in 222, 214, 221, 224, 254, in the 46 overall Indianapolis area code region. As you can see, all the countries that represented here, some of them are, some of that I mentioned, and some are not. And so you can see the juxtaposition which exists with the entire state and the city itself. Either way, it shows us that whether it's statewide or citywide, clearly there are immigrants and refugees that exist here that need our support and help, particularly when it comes to food security and access. Next, please. So what we do is Immigrant Welcome Center for a start. As you can see, there's different languages there. We have a helpline, especially through COVID-19. We've become the hub for a lot of immigrant families and refugee families who have arrived here just yesterday, who've been here for a decade. Doesn't matter how long they've been here. If they need the help, they can call us at that number there you see on the screen. And anybody can call us. In fact, we've had many people from other states call us as well. We have a lot of resources, which I'll share in a bit about how to do that. But if you ever need support in a different language, because a lot of people need that comfortability, need that space to know they're being heard in their own language, and any resources they need, they can call our helpline there at 866-711-1342. Once again, 866-711-1342, so that we can help them, because we have interpreters with over 200 different languages that can help them over the phone live in that moment. It takes less than 5 minutes for us to connect with an interpreter. Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, we are there to help. Next slide, please. You go, perfect. So the resources, we have them not only across the state, but for this presentation specifically, I wanted to research, did we also encapsulate other states? So if somebody wanted to have help in California or Minnesota, as represented here today in our panel, could that be possible? And yes, it is possible, because what we've done is we've connected with a database framework called Bertha, which some of you may be familiar with and may already be part of. And that exists nationwide. What we've done is we've modified the database to take the questions of, does the person need to have documents when coming to a food pantry? Does the person speak a different language? And if so, are they going to have somebody there who can help them in their language? If not, do they have a language line available? Also, are low-income families on different SNAP programs, WIC programs, all these different programs that exist to help families in the system, are there already enough staff members or organizations which support that? And so we wanted to know these questions because our clients said, we need to know these questions. And so in some ways, most states have like a 411, a 211, those kind of information gathering places. So especially in this day and age where we saw that most 60% of immigrants and refugees no longer have a laptop at home. In fact, their laptop is now their smartphone. And so we've seen that many people who come here don't have those equipment anymore. What they have is a phone. And most of you, I'm sure, have some kind of smartphone you use. So how can we use technology today to connect you? So here we go with the equity, justice, and peace we want to bring you. Next. So first of all, we know the language is a huge issue. Language access is very much a huge issue we have to tackle. So from the very beginning, when you go on this website, and I'll put it here in the chat box here in a second, immigrantwelcomecenter.org/Bertha, making sure you have that information. All these different languages you see represented here are there in that moment. So that person can click and already has their language they need to know what resources are part of. So what they're going to do is on the chat box to the find box in the left there, as you can see, they can put their zip code or what they're seeking. So if somebody, say in Minnesota, was in the Roseville area, saying 55113, or in California, where I grew up, 92801, or here in Indianapolis, as you saw, one of the zip codes, 46254, there are different programs that exist that sometimes only serve the people in those zip codes, as we've seen, because of funding purposes or whatever it may be. There's catchment areas, and particularly with community centers here in Indianapolis. So how can we help people in those areas? So specifically to that, the zip code and then the language. And then as you see there, there's a wide array of services, anywhere from food to legal. We want to make sure to help people. So as we talk about food today, say there was a question about a food pantry. So there they would put 46254 and put food pantry to know where to go next. Next slide, please. So what they'll do there is they'll make sure to see there's different categories of people. As you can see there on the first column, not only ages, but citizenship. So we've noticed that there's not that many places that immigrants and refugees can go to seek information of food pantries if they're scared, like we said earlier, about the legal documentation requirements, if they're not sure what languages will be present for them, they can click there for undocumented. As you can see, thank you for that red line. I love it. It's very standing out there. And the third category, we want to include our neighbors who are LGBTQ plus and transgender. We want to be as inclusive as possible. And then within that, people who are in different income levels and even insurance purposes for health options. So sometimes food also equals health. And so making sure people know that they're uninsured, underinsured. So we've done this so that people don't have to feel afraid to call these places and know that they're going to be told answers that they may be hard to hear. So we already have a database here at your fingertips that can help with that. Next slide, please. And so what's going to help you as providers of different services or school districts, instead of you having to tell the person the phone number, the address, and sometimes that can be a little tedious on the phone. In fact, sometimes it's a lot tedious, let's be honest. It's hard to know how to do this. So we are helping you there. At the very bottom where you have the share function on the arrow there, you can send a text, an email, or through Facebook, if that's the only way they communicate. You can put your name, their number, and then whatever language they need in that chat box, and all the information there will be sent immediately to their cell phone or their email or their Facebook page or inbox rather in that language. So Kiswahili, Arabic, Amharic, Kinyarwanda, Hakachin, Spanish, Portuguese, you name it. These are all the languages which exist that are pretty prevalent across Indianapolis, or immigrants in Indianapolis and other places as well. So next slide, please. So knowing that that's a great way to connect with us, I can share with you much more about this database. Like I said, it's nationwide. So what's really cool is I specifically want you all, if nothing else you hear today, is this database can be used for your community today. In fact, there's more than 2,000 programs that I looked up in these different zip codes I mentioned earlier, which exist that help people. And it's not just immigrants and refugees, it's actually everybody. We've done it so that we can combine our efforts to help immigrants and refugees with this capacity. And I think you have a PDF of mine that I want to share. Next. There's my information. Maybe you don't have it, but I'll put it in the chat box. One of the things we spoke about earlier is that there's a culturally appropriate way for food services and food pantries to have information available. And so, yeah, so I go ahead and so if you want to connect with me in any way, my contact information is there. So feel free to call me, text me, or email me if you like that. It's very important that you know how important food pantries are for immigrant populations, that they want to go to them, but at times they can't because of the information that's there. And so having the Immigrant Welcome Center there to back them up and tell them, you know what, immigrants need to have this food, and access and security is so important. And we'll talk more in the breakout rooms we'll do later about how to do this as a cohort. So for now, thank you so much, and I'll pass.
Thank you so much, Graham, for sharing all that. And in the interest of time, I'm going to be quick introducing our next speaker. Like I said earlier, last but definitely not least, I'm just learning a little bit about Frances's program. I guess I'll properly introduce her. So Frances Montoya Gatewood is in California. She started her culinary journey as a child inspired by her culture and her heritage and family. When we were talking to her yesterday, she shared with us that she started out working as an entry-level position at a middle school in the nutrition services program, nutrition food program at the school. And at that time, she was just starting out and never maybe thought that she was going to become the director. But look at her now. She has studied and got her associate's degree at Le Cordon Bleu College of Culinary Arts. And after years of working at hotels, restaurants, she really, after getting that entry-level position, has, grown programs and now just has done a wonderful job at being inclusive and growing the program at Vaughn Charter School, where she is now. In 2017, Frances was lucky enough to join that team as the food service director. And she just has so much to share about that experience. So I will pass it to Frances.
Thank you, Janine, and thank you everyone for having me here. I'm a little long-winded, so I have my timer for the sake of time and getting our tasks done. So I'm the food service director here at Vaughan Next Century Learning Center. I've been in the child nutrition industry for about 17 years now. Lucky enough to have found my passion, feeding hungry kids. I'm happy to be able to share ideas and strategies that we use here at Vaughan to expand the outreach to our community. We are here to show the example of how we customize our program to fit our community's needs. I want to start off with when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. This is so powerful for what our program is today and as the leader of this department. And we'll kind of go into it a little bit as we get through the presentation. So next slide. A little bit of history of Vaughan, because I'm so proud to represent Vaughan. We are the first charter conversion in the US, founded by the Honorable Dr. Chan. And you can look up our school's history too online. You'll see a lot of good history on Vaughan. We are K through 12 school with 5 school sites, 4 kitchens. So we serve out of 4 kitchens. We serve a population of 3,200 students. Started off in 1993 doing Provision 2 before it was even called Provision 2. And now that the pandemic has hit, more students and families qualify for SNAP benefits and things like that. So we were able to transfer over to CEP, which is a great program. And I know Emily works with CEP a lot. So if you have any questions, you should reach out because it is a great program. And of course, if you have any questions, I could be happy to answer. The meals that we served during normal times were breakfast, lunch, and after school snack. And we were able to serve like 2 options for lunch, 3 options of fruit and vegetable each day. And if we go to the next slide, I'll be able to show you a little bit of showing off a little bit, right? So this is to the left is our menu in regular school times when all school students were there. This was what I thought was showing off before, and seeing how we can translate that menu to food distribution. If you look to the right, our wonderful Alicia Escoto, who's been with Vaughan for I think 15 years. Her son started at Vaughan, became a cafeteria manager, and just retired from us, not just to another workplace, but she's showing off what we serve to her grandkids. We still offer 3 fruits and vegetables at each food distribution day. And what we do is we offer them combos. We need to entice the families to come, right? We have to think of creative ways. We do theme days. We've tried barbecuing. Los Angeles Dodgers won the World Series this year. Sorry, folks, but we did a little celebration and we barbecued the hot dogs. So let me tell you a little bit about the combos that we offer. It's like drive-through style. So I was thinking Southern California In-N-Out burger. I'm like, how do we do this? I'm thinking, how do we make it fast? So what we do is we publish our menus on social media every week. I know my website needs a little love in the food service side, but I use mostly social media to do this, and phone blasts and emails. We do it weekly and we let them know what the combos are for the week. As Maria was saying, hey, there is no cookie cutter way. Not every family has the same needs. So what we're doing is combo number 1, all dry cereal. Okay. Combo number 2 for breakfast, they're going to get burritos, pizza, all of those goodies, the cinnamon rolls, whatever options that are allowed within our restrictions, right? For lunch, they get a hot item if you get combo number 1. So it could be, you know, orange chicken and rice. So they'll get the hot item for the day. They'll get a fresh item for the next day. Could be a handmade sandwich or burrito. We make carnita burritos and all of those yummy things for our families. And then they get 3 days of frozen. So that's combo number 1. Combo number 2, maybe mom's coming during lunchtime, her lunchtime. So she grabs the all frozen option and takes it to work, throws it in the freezer till later, and then, you know, kind of distributes it out for the week or makes her plan. So then they get the 3 options of fruit and vegetables. And as everybody's collecting the food in our food distribution line, we call them runners. Our runners are actually getting a market bag and filling the fruits and vegetables for the families that they've picked. We take their order at the line and we make this happen. This idea is not, you know, Francis is doing it either. We have a collaboration of wonderful cafeteria managers, Anna, Christina, Omar, Erica, Linda, Priscilla. This is the team that we get together weekly and we say, hey, we're gonna figure it out. Okay, so again, I'm a little long-winded, so I'm timing myself. So let me try and get through a lot more ideas that we've had. We have the kids sent in photos, Chanel to the right and William to the left, enjoying our food. It's always fun to see the kids. Let's go with the next one. We still participate, right? National School Breakfast Week. We've got aprons, we had fun, we had a little bit of a different menu. We participated. That's the key in this idea. Next slide. Great Kindness Challenge. Every employee made their own sign. A shout out to the managers and the staff that did all of that. I was probably the only one that was lagging in that department, but hey, everybody had fun. Cars were honking, very emotional, and it was awesome. So we participated in that. Next slide. Okay, collaboration and connection. We have a family center at Vaughan. Within that family center, we have the honor to have Providence Wellness Center, who connect our families to benefits, SNAP, health benefits, anything you can think of. They try and get these families because, like we've said, some immigrant families are hesitant. So we have to become a safe haven for our community. Vaughn's doing this already, not just Vaughan Food Service, Vaughan as a whole. This is why we became this charter, to service our community, long before I got there. Alma Nava, wonderful outreach and connection. She's our coordinator. I gotta mention Suzanne Llamas, working for Vaughan before Vaughan was Vaughan, 31 years. She was the former food service director and community center director, dual roles, huge. She's still working with us. And you work with your foster and homeless liaisons. There's no cookie cutter way to accommodate these high need families. You do it case by case basis, right? So there is no one way that we do it, but doing it, opening that door. Next slide. Sorry, I know I'm trying to. It's all about showing up. I'm going to tell you this because it's so important. I go to every single coffee with the director where they invite parents. Coffee Clatch. I didn't even know what Clatch meant. I had to look that up, right? It's coffee with the director. Parent forums, Vaughan, we do as a best practice, parent forums. We did surveys to find out what their best needs to be met were when we started. I did a presentation asking the parents to show up at meal distribution because we needed them to show up for our program. And so guess what? By me showing up at these forums and these meetings, I'm showing up for them. I'm going to tell you just a couple of little stories. My superintendent, CEO for Vaughan, Fidel Ramirez, sends out an email, says there's a graduation for parents to the admin, you know, hey, if you're all invited, and okay, usually you kind of see those things. If you're not involved, you don't do them. I was in a 2-hour coffee with the director, 1 hour English, 1 hour Spanish. I do not speak Spanish, but I figure it out. I text with parents using Google Translate, doing with Spanish. It can be done. It does take a lot of effort. 80% of success is showing up. I'm showing up via text. I give them my school phone number. I'm going to try, right? I showed up to this graduation. I think he was a little surprised. It's okay, but I wanted to be there for them. I was able to tell them how proud I was, and they remember that. They remember me, they remember my face if I'm everywhere, and knowing that I'm a food resource, right? So maybe they're hesitant today, but not tomorrow. Maybe they've had my phone number and just haven't called. One more outreach. I have students connecting with me via text, asking for food for the week because they can't come to meal distribution. If that doesn't tell you all about food insecurity and high need, I don't know what does. I'm their food resource and I go and deliver it to them. If you think it's going to open up a floodgate, it really isn't. You show up for them and they'll show up for you. So my message, my ideas, not just me, but as best practices for Vaughn is, you know, do the outreach, take the extra steps. It's so, so important, and making those connections, because in the long run, we're going to still figure it out. I used to be kind of bogged down by the red tape and having to say no all the time as a nutrition services director because of all the rules and regulations, but the national waivers and, you know, the pandemic has opened the door to say yes. And we're becoming yes directors, and we need to ride this wave till and fight for that, you know, all free forever for these kids, right? So let's do it. I'm a yes director. I want to help you. Let's get into the action plan. And I'm done. I didn't share my email address, but I'm sure that the ladies can get that to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I am going to join Shannon and Barbara and the Francis Fan Club. We're going to start one after this workshop. So I can't say thank you enough to the three of you for being just such amazing panelists and sharing such great stories and resources and inspiring us all here today. So thank you for everything that you do and for sharing it with us. It's now Q&A time, so I'll give folks a moment to send their questions in the chat, and Debbie's joining the fan club too, so feel free to put questions in the chat, or if you would prefer to ask your question aloud, we'd love to hear your voice, so you can raise your hand and I'll call on you and you can unmute yourself. We did have a few folks send questions in ahead of time. So thank you to those of you who did, moving all of my Zoom screens around here to get to it. So one question that came in was, how have you found ways to overcome the hunger stigma and empower students to participate in the meals program? So if maybe Maria or Francis, if you found stigma present in your community and ways that you found to overcome it, and Graham, especially with the lens of families who have immigration status or refugee status, and that's a whole nother layer of stigma and access barriers. We'd love to hear what ways you found to help fight back that stigma.
I can jump in. First thought, at the beginning of the pandemic a year ago, we were hearing from a lot of families the idea that they didn't want to take a resource from someone else that needed it more. We had a lot of families who were concerned that they didn't really need anything and someone else would probably benefit from it first. And so we just had to do a lot of education that first, we won't run out of food, we can feed everyone. And second, the more students we feed, the more it supports our program, keeps our staff employed, and just really did outreach that way to try to entice families that maybe wouldn't normally participate with us, to encouraging them to participate. So I think that was something like right off the bat, we realized that families were feeling hesitant because they didn't want to take someone else's resources, and just really letting them know we have plenty of food, we can feed everyone, and just like really welcoming them in, but a lot of education piece.
I would add to that, Maria, as well, that advocating as you providers, as school districts, as you school officials here on the call, whatever capacity you work with the people that, especially the students you're serving, like they can't speak for themselves. Like you have to do it for them. So learning about the ways that you can advocate for your students, I think is crucial to helping them with the stigma, because a lot of the students that we've come across, especially, have to be their parents almost like guide into this world and the systems. They know better than their parents, especially immigrant children know more. I can speak as one, my mom didn't know English at the time when I first came here in 97. And so it was really hard for her to go through that. And I'm sure it's a lot of difficulties placed on parents. So just knowing that the children can't advocate for their parents, that you have to be the ones, and always that gains you the trust of the parents that you're working with, so the students can beat that stigma moving forward.
I just want to jump in and say that, having that forum in the beginning before we started serving for the new year, giving them the information and letting them know it's teamwork too, so they feel like they're included in participating. So then it drops, any of that stigma of thinking, oh, I'm getting free food, right? So saying, hey, you come and help us, like help me help you type mindset, and that's kind of help some people, not everybody. You still have to try it a lot of different ways, but I think that does help the information piece.
And thanks for those of you who let me know I was still sharing my screen while creating a poll. You got a preview on whether or not we should take a 5-minute break after this. But we still have some great questions here. So I'm going to read a question from Robert. So how do you think about participation in the way of kids and families connecting with friends as ambassadors for the program? And have you tried any strategies to get families or kids to be kind of ambassadors of the program? And I know, Janine, if you want to, or I know that you spoke with the district to use momfluencers to post about the school meals program and what meals were available for the day. If you want to share briefly about that too.
Sure, real quick. So there's a school district here in South Texas who the moms would take pictures of the meals, just like you were saying, Emily, and they had their own Facebook page. And they, after a while, they call themselves the momfluencers because they like highlight the meals. They're like very culturally appropriate meals as well. So they're having foods that, that the community enjoys. So they want to make sure, like Francis was mentioning, that they take advantage of those meals to help the program as well. And so they're just really going strong, and the community goes first to them and sees, oh, and the pictures make a big difference, because when you're hungry, or even if you're not, and you see a picture of good food. So it's been really great.
Any one of our panelists want to add to that? And I saw, Robert, you raised your hand on screen. Do you have a question that you want to ask aloud, or are you just cheering Janine on?
I was cheering everyone on. The whole idea of this webinar is great. The participation is great. The examples are great. And it's nice to hear a specific response targeting my question about getting value from ambassadors, whether they're officially appointed or you unofficially appoint them. I'm saying that because whenever I see any sort of successful program, there's often people who want to know how to recruit that same success. And I think there's great value in asking the people who come there, what brings you in the first place and what brings you back? If you're here and you're happy to come back, bring some friends.
And I would also add to that, Robert, and say that it happened here recently that there was a school district, forget which school it was here, that had their students for the day, they ran the social media that day and they got their friends involved and everything. And it was a great experiment. And when I think it's being repeated every so often, is that kids who clearly have a handle on social media can also encourage their friends. And if there was an experiment, how can you run your social media for the day as a school district? And the kids loved it. And so I think even if you're willing to try new things, try that.
Yeah.
All right, we have another question from Alexis. What is one of the biggest lessons that you've learned during COVID about operating the federal child nutrition program? Francis or Maria?
Yeah, I would like to answer that. Something I touched on in my rush, 10-minute rush, is that the meaning of what we do this, why we do this, right, is to reach those families in need. I come from districts that are 50-50, right? And I didn't get that concept till I went to Vaughan, luckily. But pandemic has shown us that piece everywhere now and how easily we can be on the other side of that line, right? So with that in mind, what it's shown me and taught me is that dignity, respect, and reaching out, like showing up and just going for it. Hey, who knows what that next email is going to be or what's going on? Find out, show up, right? And so I think it's just taught me to put myself more out there, put the team more out there, tell them, hey, what's going on? You can ask my team. I always go, well, why did that happen then? Go find out, right? And so we need to just put ourselves more out there and be ready and available. So it taught me to do that. And we can reach more families.
The only thing I would add to that is that I do feel like it was, and I kind of mentioned this earlier, but a time for us in our communities just to see how valued school nutrition programs are. Often we're, second to mind or really behind the scenes. And I think it was really nice, at least for me, and I know at the beginning of the year for our staff, to really feel like we were doing something great, and just to keep that reminder up through the coming years that once kids are back in school, what we're doing is still great, and those kids need those meals just as much as they did when we felt like that initial sense of purpose sending meals out last March. I think that would be just keeping it front of mind that what we're doing is part of the school day and it is crucial and our kids rely on us. And make sure that you're telling your story, because other parts of your school or your community might not be thinking about it how you are. And I think the pandemic gave us an opportunity to dip our toes into that world a little bit.
Thank you both, and thanks, Alexis, for the question. We have an interesting one here from Linda. There are efforts in her city to start addressing childhood obesity, and is that something that we should be thinking about in tandem with food insecurity? And how does that play into the work that we do around hunger relief? And she specifically works at a food bank. So Graham, I was wondering if you had any, in your work with food banks, had any examples that you might share.
How much time do you have, Emily? So there is, right, there's so many immigrant perspectives, and I can think of two right now. From a woman who is from Egypt, talked about just how, first of all, that there's such a stigma that comes with being in food banks. So let's just name that first, that people don't go to food banks because of the stigma. And then the other part of it is, as a woman from Colombia, I remember her talking about how she used the food bank, and when she goes home and checks what they give her, she has to throw away half or more of the food because it's expired. Also, sometimes the cans can have expiration dates that are confusing. And then the other part, which speaks to your question here, there's diabetes and cholesterol issues she already has, so she cannot use the foods. So a lot of what we say in that capacity, and I'd be happy to speak with the person who asked the question more, because this is kind of the work we've been doing through the pandemic, is looking at what does a top food bank here provide. Like, so Gleaners is the one here that provides different foods, like top 5 foods: cereal, pasta, jelly, canned goods, white or brown rice. Our immigrants, the food they seek: rice, onions, beans, garlic, and tomatoes. So the top 5 foods, clearly some of them correlate and some of them don't. So I would encourage you all to think about what are the food banks serving, and especially when it comes to these countries that have such a healthy diet, that when they come here, their diet becomes unhealthy because of the pantries that provide this food. So I would say, as you think about your cities or your states' obesity rates and everything, looking into your local health department and asking these questions and advocating for the people who come to food banks, saying, not only is it not culturally appropriate, like the PDF that was shared earlier, but also the healthy nutrition part isn't jiving in as well. And so I think as providers, again, advocating is what we can do to make sure that these food banks provide. And one thing I'll say more is that here we've piloted an experiment with the Indianapolis Muslim Community Association's food pantry. And so we've begun to see that more immigrants are coming because we're giving them the food that they are needing. And so looking into specific food banks that provide this food and seeing how you can change the model of what they serve to what your communities are really asking. So ask your communities, survey them, say, what food do you need? And bring that information to the people who make these decisions, and you'll see what can happen.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Graham. We have a couple more questions here, and I know we're quickly running out of time. So I am going to go through some of these, but just to let you know that we're not going to have a lot of time to do the action planning together, but hopefully this action plan, which I'll send the link in the chat, is straightforward enough. And I'll take a couple minutes at the end to kind of explain how to complete it. But just to let you know that there's probably not going to be enough time to do all of this. And I think the questions are really great. So we have a question around federal food programs for park and rec agencies that would be able to serve adult participants with disabilities. So the Summer Food Service Program, SFSP, is allowable for kids up to 18 and then anyone 18 or over with disabilities, mental or physical. So the Summer Food Service Program is an option. And technically the Child and Adult Care Food Program, or CACFP, Adult Daycare Program may also work, but there are some restrictions that are a little tough to navigate. So I can connect the person who asked this question with my colleague who is a CACFP expert. But SFSP is also an option as well, and we can chat afterwards. But in case anyone else has those questions, or I know many school districts have programs for students who are older than 18 with disabilities. So thank you for asking that. We had another question about being a white American woman. How do we help families understand public charge and food benefits available, and why should they listen to me? I think that is an excellent question. And I think it's the right question to be asking. I think we already shared probably some of the answers, which is who in your community are the trusted members, community members and trusted messengers that you can kind of work with them to filter information to, because very well may be that families with immigration status don't trust you because of your race and the way that you look and speak and talk. And I think that's really self-aware. And so I see, Maria, you took yourself off mute. I'd love to hear your thoughts to this question.
I bet Graham would be a better person to answer this, but I'm pretty sure that the in March, the 2019 public charge final rule was removed. But I don't know if there was as much press behind that as there was when it went into effect. Graham can probably speak to that more. But that might be just like an education piece. Again, like I might not be the best person to tell my families that, but our cultural liaisons, our social workers, they might be the better voice.
Yeah, definitely. The better voice, I think, is a perfect way to say it, is that we at the Immigrant Welcome Center have a lot of voices who are in the community that already have leadership roles. And so so a person who is from a different country may not trust you for whatever reason, but it doesn't mean you can't have somebody who looks like them or speaks like them be with you as a team. I have many thoughts about collaboration, and one of them is that the more diverse your organization or your district can be, the more the people can see from the outside in that it's representative of who they are. And so I would definitely think that like Maria's saying, like educate yourself more on these public charge, all these different things. These programs did go away as far as because a lot of immigrants have fear over the fact that they are going to be scrutinized and taken away their immigration status when they apply for citizenship because of public charge. But now that it's gone away, there's still a fear because what comes next. And so I think educating your populations, and again, having people who speak like them and look like them, if you can, is a great way for you to show that you care about them, and you do it because you have somebody there who can speak with them.
Thank you. And while I'm pulling up the action plan, we have one last question. And that is there anything policy-wise that you have advocated for, whether that's at the local level or state level, that maybe our participants could think about, not just how to get meals to kids, but breaking down these barriers through policy? Any thoughts on that?
Advocate for free meals for everyone. Just the momentum has been built, and we need to continue it and get with all of your associations and continue to support this cause, because although Vaughn is universal feeding, I've been places where we're not, and we can there's parents that are barely making it that don't meet the criteria for free and reduced lunch. I was one of those parents, still struggling to get all of my kids' lunch money on their books in my own district. Hey, this could be a great help for those people that are on the cusp. So I say advocate for free lunch for all. It's that's something that's thriving right now, and it's a great way to start.
I second that. We've had this great year of a unplanned pilot of what universal meals can look like. And I think right now is as good as time as any that our politicians are starting to really see that this is doable, and the price tag actually isn't as high as we originally thought. So yeah, at the federal level, there's a couple bills sitting out there. I could put into the chat some of the links, but yes, I second universal meals.
And I thirded, and also saying that when we're talking about these meals, what would it look like to not only think about these meals not being culturally appropriate, but then just bringing about the culture that food is just what it is, and bringing international cuisine to our kids' plates, so that in food pantries, it's no longer we have to think about rice and beans as an exception to the rule, but rather as an inclusion to it as well. And so having that be the norm for the universal meals, advocating for those, because families love to eat their food, their comfort food, especially when they feel unsafe. So having that wonderful would be great.
Lots of plus ones in the chat to this conversation. I really like, Shannon, what you added in the chat, that food is a universal language. That's a great way to think about it. So I know we've been sitting here for an hour and 20 minutes and a lot of listening. I encourage you, if you're off camera or on camera, to get up and stretch and move around for a second. We've got about 11 minutes left. And I see many of you are in the Google Doc, which I'm going to share my screen now. And Anonymous Duck is there at the A. Let me throw in the chat the link again, just so that it's at the ready for you. So if you can go ahead and open the link in the chat, I'll give you a second to do that. We're going to download it so that you have your own copy. And this is what you're going to submit for a CEU if you're looking to get a continuing education credit from SNA. So see, about 40 people are in it, it's growing. So to download it, because this is view only so that no one is entering their information over top of each other, you're going to go to File and Download, and then usually a Word document works. And that will open then at the bottom of your browser, and you can use this as your own personal copy for submitting later. Any questions or anyone having trouble opening this document, go ahead and put it in the chat if you are. And then linked on the Google Doc, both here and in the one that you download, is a Google form. So when you have completed your action plan, which we're going to walk through it in a second, you can just open the link to the Google form and then fill out your name, email address, all of that good stuff. I'm on the back end. This is the front end. And then you can add the file here. So if you save it somewhere on your laptop that you can access, then you can just click that upload where it says, please submit your completed action plan, click upload, add file, and then attach the file and click OK. And then submit it. So if that doesn't work and you're like, this isn't happening for me, just email me. My email address is there, and I will give you a CEU without having to submit this plan. I've been talking a lot. Anna or Janine, do you want to walk through the action plan, or I can continue here?
Yeah, happy to do so. So in the first section, I think really these are questions to kind of reflect and digest what we just spoke about and all of the great information that our panelists shared. So use these as kind of like a guiding thing to really guide you to that answer and analyze what applies to your district. What are the barriers? What are the specifics? And then once you go through that, go through all the motions. I always encourage folks, encourage yourself to be vulnerable and really ask the hard questions, right? Once you get through all of those roller coaster emotions, go through the action planning. And we have some great questions here in terms of analyzing what are the barriers that exist that prevent children and families in your community from accessing school meal programs. You know, we spoke a little bit about what those barriers may be throughout this workshop, but obviously if you want to have more of a conversation or are struggling to answer these questions, you can contact any one of us, right? And all the panelists provided their contact information so that they can also help you think through some of those items as well. And we're also here available too. And we can also share all of their contact information again once we send out a follow-up email with all of that great stuff. But really here, again, digging into what are the communities that are doing this work? Is there a way that I can partner with an organization? Are they doing great things? So for example, in Indiana, we love working with Graham because he gives us insight into a lot of the pockets of families that we want to make sure that we're reaching in our meal programs. And so thinking about how our No Kid Hungry Indiana campaign can partner with you know, the Immigrant Welcome Center. So thinking about ways that people are actually doing this work and carrying it forward. And then thinking about the community stakeholders. Again, family students are the most important stakeholders that we can possibly ever include in this meal program. We're here to support them. We're here to provide meals for them, right? So how can we ensure that we're including them into our program and thinking about those folks that you can rely on? Maria talked about her cultural liaison and her social workers. So what are the folks that we can call on and say, hey, let's invite them to the table. Let's talk about this. Let's have a conversation. And yeah, is there anything else that I missed that you guys would like to add, Emily, Janine, or panelists? No, I'll take that silence.
I don't think you missed anything. So in summary, it's 7 questions here. You don't have to answer at great length, but just a couple sentences, bullet points are fine. And like I said, you can just submit your action plan there. And the resource that Anna previewed at the beginning of the workshop is a great one. They're also hyperlinked here, conversation starters, and another one, let your community shape your program. Both have really great questions and examples to think through, as that might help jog your brain as you're starting to work through this action plan. And certainly last but not least, as you're beginning to do this work and having conversations in your community, we would love to stay in touch and hear how you're doing and what kinds of things you're trying and what's working and what's not. So please do stay in touch. And maybe right now, all of the panelists and No Kid Hungry staff included can put our email addresses in here, and you can reach out to any of us to chat about any of this. And I see Kathleen added a great, some great thoughts in the chat. So we have about 4 minutes left. Would love any thoughts, reactions, more questions from the group. Feel free to, thank you, Anna. Feel free to ask them aloud, or again, raise your hand or throw them in the chat. And I'll hop on the technical questions here. And if there aren't any more questions, you can have a couple minutes back in your day. And again, just thank you so much for joining us in this conversation. I feel like, I mean, what better examples than Maria, Graham, and Francis to learn from today? They're just, again, phenomenal, and so grateful to have them joining us. So please do take advantage of all of the awesome resources that Graham especially shared that, again, are available nationwide, and we'll send a follow-up email cataloging some of this. And thank you all for your efforts to design more inclusive meals programs. The work is tough, but it is so important. And I'll just end it on that note. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.